and welcome to Jindal Global University. And today I will be taking a lecture on a topic which is very close to my research interest. Before that, can I request you all to turn your cameras on? I just see three people. So if the three of you can turn the cameras on, and then we can just do a small intro and then turn the cameras off.
Ma'am, I got this surgery then I can't open my camera right
No problem, Shri. Okay, I think there's a lot of bandwidth issues as well.
now.
So, okay, I will turn my cameras back. Yeah, let's not turn the cameras on. I'm having a lot of internet issues. Yeah. Can you hear? Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. So, can we just start with a brief intro about you all? I'll start with Shivi. Hi, Shivi. Could you
Hi,
just
ma'am.
introduce yourself?
My name is Well, born and brought up in Delhi. I've completed my graduation from Delhi University, Bhimrao Ambedkar College in economics only.
In economics honors? Shivi, hello.
Yeah,
Shivi?
yeah.
Yeah, in economics honors.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. You're from Delhi?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Shivi. Welcome. Nishtha,
Yes, ma'am.
hi.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, everyone. My name is Nishtha and I'm from Haryana, Jajjar.
Okay,
And I've completed my graduation from Kalindi College, Delhi University.
okay, okay. What did you do in your graduation? Economics honors or
No, ma'am. I've done BCom program.
BCom honors?
Program.
Program. Okay,
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
Nishtha. Welcome, Nishtha. I'm having lots of internet issues. Samvit, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mama. Good morning.
Hi, hi. Good morning.
I'm from Delhi as well, and I've completed my graduation in economics honors from Ramjas College, Delhi University.
From which college?
Ramjas College, ma'am.
Oh, Ramjas. Oh, good, good. Thanks, Ambit. Thanks. So I also have Yashovardhan joining us. Hi, Yashvardhan.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, everyone.
Hi. So I just started and I started with a brief introduction. Can you just introduce yourself briefly? Tell me where you're from, what was your undergraduate course, and from where did you do it?
Okay, so I'm Yashovardhan. I'm currently living in Ghaziabad, Uttar Pradesh, and I did my undergrad from Khalsa College in Delhi University in BCom honors.
Become honest. Perfect, perfect. So, welcome to Jindal Global University, and let me start by introducing myself. I am Sunena Dhingra. I'm as new as you all are because I also was recently hired. So this is my start of my academic career in terms of teaching in formal terms. Though I've had a fair teaching experience at the undergraduate and the postgraduate level. Prior to coming to Jindal, I was working as a postdoc at Cornell University, USA, and I was there for 3 years. And there, my work was primarily research. I work on areas like nutrition, education, health, food policy, agriculture, etc. And I also have mentored PhD students and other graduate and undergraduate students as a part of my postdoc at Cornell, but they all were primarily working on the same area as my research interest, which is of nutrition, education, health, agriculture, etc. And before going to Tata Cornell, I was working at Delhi School of Economics as an assistant professor, where I was tutoring master students. And that was also the time when I was doing my PhD. So I did my PhD from Delhi School in economics, and I graduated in 2018. And even before I did my PhD, I was working as an assistant professor at various colleges of Delhi University. I worked at Daulat Ram College, I worked at Shivaji College, Rajdhani College. So yeah, I've had a flavor of the undergraduate teaching at Delhi University as well. And as far as my education background is concerned, I have always been affiliated with Delhi University. My graduation was from Delhi College of Arts and Commerce, DCAC, in economics honors. My master's was from Jamia in economics, and then my PhD was again from Delhi University, Delhi School of Economics. So today what I'm going to do is, like, I'm sure you've had multiple prestige programs and lectures by other of my colleagues, and they have introduced you to what the program will entail in the coming future. As far as my lecture today is concerned, I would be doing a little bit of drifting away from telling you what is public policy about, what is economics all about, what are your career opportunities after economics honors, or what are your career opportunities after public policy program. I believe that most of my colleagues have spoken about that. What I would be doing today is basically talking about the topic which is very close to my heart and is very close to my research and also my teaching. So in case since you all are doing master's program here in public policy, you would be in the first semester, more or less you have 4 papers, but in the second semester onwards and second year onwards, you will be you have to make decisions regarding the choice of electives that you're going to take. And the electives, as of now, I'm offering 2 electives. I'm sure this is not offered like open to you all, but through my lecture, I intend to give you a brief idea of what my courses would entail, what is my topic of interest, and what is the area I work around. And I'm looking forward to all of you, to come and join that course, and maybe we can interact more deeper once you're affiliated with that course. So today I'm just going to give you one aspect of my my interest. I'll show you one aspect of my interest, and I do see one more person has joined, Adya. Adya, could you just briefly introduce yourself? I just have 4 or 5 people in the lecture today, so it's nice to know names and talk in detail.
Yeah, hi, I'm Adya, and I'm doing MA Economics, and yeah.
Oh, you're doing MA Economics at the Jindal School?
Yeah.
So, okay. Also, if all of you could, again, I'm sorry, but if you could tell me what program have you joined? So Adya has joined MA Economics. What about others? Could you just sum with what course have you joined? Public policy or economics?
Economics, ma'am.
Okay, Shivi?
Economics, ma'am.
Yashvardhan?
Economics, ma'am. I think the class is for an economics. I'm not sure.
Oh, it's not for public. Okay, I thought that it's like a combined for public policy. Perfect.
No.
So all of you. So okay, I am a core economics person, but obviously the kind of area I deal with is both. It's a public policy issue. It's malnutrition and education. But I am a trained microeconomist, so my training has been on a econometrics to undergraduate, which is a 3rd year course. Okay, I will be offering this semester. And the second course that I offer to master student is also an elective. It's called Microeconomics of International Development. This is a cross elective. It's open for economics as well as yeah, I think my internet broke. So I'm back. So my second course is Microeconomics of International Development. It is also primarily economics, but since I will be dealing with a lot of topics like health, education, poverty, intra-household models and all, so it's going to be a cross-elective, which is also open for public policy people. So what through my course today, what you will all get to know is that what kind of work I do and what kind of courses do I anticipate to take in the future when you would be choosing your electives. Okay, so without taking more time, I'll straight away go to my topic, which is let me share my screen. What do you all see? Can any one of you?
It's a
Ma'am,
blue
it's a
screen at the
blue
moment.
screen.
Okay. There's some issue with the internet. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. Give me a second. Do you see a screen with a it's a white screen with some thing written hunger and malnutrition in India?
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. So today I'm going to talk about I'm sure you all have heard about sustainable development goals, and my talk today would be basically on one of those SDGs. To hunger and malnutrition and see where do we as a country, like as India, stand in achieving the second sustainable development goal of zero hunger. So as you all know that over the past years, India has put a lot of efforts to make its priorities of employment, economic growth, food, water, energy security, disaster resilience, poverty alleviation. So all of these have been on top of all the development economists and other policymakers in figuring out the solutions to these problems. India has also aimed to restore its natural capital and adopt a more transparent and a robust governance. However, India continues to face emerging challenges of climate change impacts. It continues to face increasing inequities as well as lagging human development indices. And this is not just known to us, it's known to the entire world that India is facing some development challenges as well as the government. So today we'll pick up one of these SDGs and see what is India doing to attain that, to achieve that, what India needs to do to attain that and achieve that, and what's the gap between actual and real. I mean, actual and planned probably. So in case you have any questions, I can't see raise hand options and chat options at the moment because I'm using two screens. I don't have a third screen. In case you have any questions, I want this to be an interactive session. Please unmute yourself and politely just cut me into the talk, okay? If there's any questions you have. So just to give you a brief upon what SDGs are, in 2015, basically, the member of the United Nations came up with an agenda, which is called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, that gave some 17 sustainable development goals. They are popularly known as SDGs. Now, what does these SDGs do? These SDGs are basically goals which aim to build on the work of the Millennium Development Goals. and complete what they did not achieve. So there were some Millennium Development Goals that were made. However, we did not achieve it. So what did the United Nations and their members do is that they came together and said, okay, let's break it up and let's have smaller targets. So they made 17 goals with 169 targets. So there were 17 sustainable development goals. Within that, there were some 169 targets, which they planned, so that they could meet by 2030. So for 15 years, they made some goals and targets. Now, these goals were made or designed to take a holistic approach to address socio-economic and environmental aspects of sustainable development. So basically, development was happening, but they had to make sure that it was sustainable. So they took a very broad approach, a holistic approach, covering socio-economic and environmental aspects. Okay. So what is the benefit of these SDGs? Because they are sustaining the development plans, they give us an opportunity to renew and integrate the efforts to meet the significant degree of national and global aspirations in a defined time frame. Now, what I would be doing is I would be focusing only on the second goal, which is the goal of zero hunger, SDG 2 of zero hunger. What is the aim of this goal? This goal specifically aims to end hunger, and it is explicit in its aim of tackling malnutrition, which was absent in the framing of the Millennium Development Goals. So to end hunger was a part of the MDG, but to end malnutrition was not a part of the MDG. It was only in the SDG that it was included. So if we look at India now, particularly, in India, great efforts have been made to reduce hunger in the past 25 years. So if we see that production, Green Revolution has increased production so much, but there is a big problem of malnutrition which continues to remain. There's a big problem of micronutrient deficiency, which is stubbornly high in India. Along with that, there are a large number of inter and intra-regional inequalities in reducing hunger and poverty. So if we look at India particularly, the challenge in achieving this zero hunger goal of SDG continues to be very high for India. Now, this SDG 2, which is zero hunger, is further divided into 5 sub-targets. Okay, there are many sub-targets. The first is very much close to the Millennium Development Goal, which is to end hunger. Okay. So initially it was basically only meeting the calorie requirements. That is what hunger meant. Nobody should go hungry, means people should have adequate food. That was the Millennium Development Goal. However, it was realized that that is not a sufficient thing. We also need nutritious food along with sufficient food. So in the Millennium Development Goal, the emphasis was on the quantity of food. But in SDG 2, the emphasis was on the quality and diversity. So what was suggested that we need to adopt a broad approach that promotes the supply as well as affordability of a nutritious diet. A nutritious diet is central to meet SDG 2. So initially it was only meeting the quantity goal, but now it's meeting the quantity as well as quality as well as affordability. Even if there's a supply of micronutrient food, people should be able to buy it. Okay, so there was a need of a lot of things in this SDG, and not just that. It was also required that if we have nutritious food, we also need other factors like access to clean drinking water, better sanitation, behavioral change, women's empowerment, overall investments in public health, because if we are eating a good diet, it needs to be absorbed by our body also. So there were many things that were intertangled or tangled in this broad target of zero hunger. So I'll go with each of these sub targets today. So the broad goal is subdivided into 5 sub targets, and the first target 2.1, by definition, is very close to the broad goal and aims to end hunger and ensures access by all people, in particular the poor as well as the vulnerable, including infants, to safe, nutritious and sufficient food all year round by 2030. So that's sub-target 1. Let's see, where is India? So where does India stand with respect to undernourishment? Okay, not undernutrition. Undernourishment, or in simpler terms, hunger. So panel A is for hunger, basically calories, quantity of food. And panel B is for poverty, okay? Now, so the orange bar is basically telling you the MDG target, what was the Millennium Development Goal target. And the blue bars is the actuality, actual numbers. So we only have data for 2011 for poverty. So looking at panel B, by 2011, okay, India was able to achieve the MDG target. So if we see in 1993, almost 46% of the people were poor, and the target was to reduce it to 23% by 2011. And if we look at the blue bar for 2011, we see that we were quite similar to 23%. So we had reached the poverty target. But if we talk about undernourishment, if we look at the blue bars and the red bar or orange bar in the left extreme panel, so there are two diagrams in panel A. Looking at the leftmost one, what we saw was that if we look at undernourishment, the difference between the blue bar and the orange bar was huge. The target was to have 105 million, almost 50% reduction from 210 million to 105 million by 2016-18. But what we could only achieve was a 194 million. There was slight reduction in the number of people who were undernourished. And if we talk about in percentage terms, the goal was to move from 24% to 12%, but we kept around 15%. Now, it may seem that, okay, 15% is not very far from 12%. But if we look at the global numbers, India stands the highest in the global numbers in terms of undernourishment. And it's very surprising to see that the number of people undernourished is almost a drop of only 15 million, which is very less. It's almost the same. Over a period of almost 28 years, India's number of people who are undernourished did not fall down. So what is this undernourishment? It's the percentage of population that has access to sufficient food measured in calories per capita. So as of now, we are talking about quantity. How much calories per person per day? Are we meeting those calories? The answer is no. We are not meeting the number of calories every individual should eat per day. We are not even talking about the quality of those calories. Okay. So if we look at these numbers, India has to reduce hungry people by 200 million by 2030, which is a big goal, and it seems to be very high. Now, since that was the MDG of, meeting the calories, let us look at beyond, talking about calories, that is access to sufficient food. Let's talk about nutritious food. Nutritious food is basically protein, micronutrient rich foods, milk, meat, eggs and fish, pulses. These are all micronutrient dense food. What we are seeing is that the consumption of these food is increasing, but it's still very low compared to calorie dense staples, compared to carbohydrates. Cereals are still the biggest chunk of our consumption. There is improvement, there is diversification happening, but something wrong is happening along the lines. And that wrong thing is that prices of these better products, good quality or micronutrient rich food, is increasing far more at a higher rate than the prices of staples. which leads to affordability question. Even though we are having micronutrient production, production of micronutrient food, but people are not able to purchase it because the prices of these food products is very high. So what has happened over the past 50 years is that prices of staple grains like wheat, rice, bajra, ragi has gone down, but prices of fruits, vegetables, pulses, livestock has increased and is highly volatile. And because the relative prices of these protein-rich food is higher, it's the poor affordability makes people very much prone to micronutrient deficiency in India. And this concept is also called hidden hunger. Now, what is happening because of this hidden hunger is that because people are not having a protein or a micronutrient rich diet, people are having poor nutritional outcomes. For example, child stunting, wasting, high levels of anemia among women. These are all causes of poor micronutrient diet. And this is happening because these micronutrient rich food are very expensive. What is also happening in India is that consumption of processed food, if you look at the blue line in the second graph, is increasing way high. The consumption is increasing dramatically because it's very cheap. So fresh food is expensive. Preserved food with preservatives, food and beverages like Coke, Pepsi, chips, these are all cheaper, which is also leading to a problem of overweight and obesity in the country. Hence, we are facing issues of undernutrition along with the challenge of overnutrition. So it's called the dual burden of malnutrition. Now, so this is very much close. Whatever I just spoke about malnutrition is very close to the second sub-target, which calls to end all form of malnutrition. And that includes, it's also a target which is less than the 2030 target, like we have to achieve this by 2025. And the target is to end under 5 child stunting and wasting by 2025 and to end all forms of malnutrition by 2030 and address the nutritional needs of adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women and older persons. So basically the sub-target 2.2 says that we need to end child malnutrition by 2025, which includes stunting and wasting. And we need to end adolescent and pregnant and lactating women malnutrition by 2030. Seeing where is India? Let's look at the trends of child undernutrition in India from 1992 to 2016, because that's the most latest data that we have. We have 4 rounds of NFHS. The 5th round is not yet out. The data is not out. The numbers are. So what I'm using is I'm using the first round, the 4th round of NFHS. 92-93 is the first round. 15-16, the orange bar is the 4th round. And the blue bar is more recent data, which is 2016-18, which is the CNNS data, Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey data. Looking at the trends over from 92-93 to 2016-18, what we see is that for India, eliminating child malnutrition will be very challenging. We see a drop of only 15% in stunting over the period of almost 25 years. Stunting means that kids under 5 children are too short for their age. That means if they're compared with a healthy population of under 5 of children of their age, they are very short compared to them. Underweight means that if we compare children of the same age, they are quite thin or weak, I would say. They're too thin for their weight, for their age. And wasting is basically comparing children of the same height. So children are very weak compared to healthy children of the same height. So these are the 3 indicators of child undernutrition, capturing chronic and acute malnutrition. What we have seen is that not much has changed between 2016 and 2018. We see the numbers of orange and blue bar are almost similar. And we do see there has been some progress from the green bars to orange and blue bars. Reduction has happened in malnutrition, but it has been slow. And what we also see in this graph is that despite being slow, in spite being slow, it is also very much variable across the country. So we see that some regions, the lagging regions of central and eastern India, particularly Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, these are the areas which are characterized by low agricultural productivity and high rural poverty levels. And these are also the areas where stunting and underweight comes out to be very high. So we see that there's an overlap between poor regions and regions with high undernutrition. Looking at the global level, where is India? We see that India tops the chart. All other countries, even sub-Saharan Africa, the yellow bars are below, which is much more poorer than India, is having better outcomes of stunting and underweight, but India does a poor job. India has the highest number of stunted and underweight kids across the developing regions. Looking at the second problem, the dual burden, the second problem is the adult overweight trends. And what we see is that we do not have data for 92-93. So what we have is only a data for over 10 years. And we see that overweight trends have almost doubled, especially for males. It has increased for women as well, but they always were higher for women. Women were more obese or overweight compared to men. And what we have seen is an unprecedented increase in obesity rates, both in the rural areas and the urban areas. So initially, overweight was a problem of the rich. People were rich, were consuming more fat and high sugar diet. But what is happening is that as the development is happening, these products, because of globalization, privatization, these fatty products and highly sugar and aerated drinks have become cheaper, and poorer people are actually getting more prone to this obesity problem. For India, we see that in the last 10 years, obesity has doubled for men, and for women it has increased by 62%. It's a huge amount. Looking at the regional or district-wise variation in adult malnutrition, I've combined male and female, and I'm looking at the district level using the fourth round of the National Family Health Survey. What I see is that the adult obesity, the right map, overlaps with the child stunting map. So the areas that were poorer were also the areas with poorer overnutrition levels. Obesity is now a known risk for non-communicable diseases like diabetes, cancer, and other chronic diseases. And if people are getting overweight, and especially poor, who can't even afford the health expenses, it's going to be a big challenge for India to maintain the death rates in India. And not just that, even the undernutrition continues to be high. So India is facing multiple challenges on nutrition front. Now, how do we achieve these sub-target 2.1 and 2.2 leads to the sub-target 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5? To be able to end hunger, to be able to end malnutrition, the United Nations and its members within the SDG 2 of zero hunger made a sub-target of 2.3, saying that we need to double the agricultural productivity and incomes of small-scale food producers, in particularly women, indigenous people, family farmers, pastoralists, fishery. We need to include equal access to land. We need to include equal access to productive resources and inputs. We need to include equal access to knowledge, financial service, access to market and opportunities for value addition and for non-farm employment. So basically, we could only achieve this goal of zero hunger and malnutrition if we also include a sub goal of doubling the productivity, because In India and as across the developing countries, agriculture is a big chunk of the GDP. A large amount of population is employed in agriculture. So sub-target 2.3 calls for doubling productivity and income of small-scale producers by 2030. So how can you increase productivity? We can increase productivity by increasing yields per capita. That means on the same piece of land, we are able to grow more quantity of crop. We need to intensify cultivation. That means initially, if the land was only used for one crop in a year, now we need to intensify cultivation by growing 2 or 3 crops per year on the same piece of land. We need to improve the efficiency of input. So if initially one packet of fertilizer was giving us that many quantity of output, we need to increase that. In the same amount of fertilizer, we need to increase the quantity of product. This will increase the total factor productivity of the land. And if we are able to increase yields, if we are able to intensify cultivation, what it is basically doing is it's giving more output to the same land. That means farmer will be able to increase their income because they will be able to sell more per piece of land. Hence, we need to have explicitly income growth oriented strategies which include the promotion of production systems, diversification for crops and livestock, as well as enhancing rural non-farm employment opportunities. Now, why do we have to focus so much on small holders? We're talking about double small farmers' productivities because a majority of the world's agricultural production take place on small and marginal farmers. If you look at the graph, the blue, we have many blues here, but the one which is on the left, less than 2 hectares of land. If we look at that, over 500 million small farms are cultivated by 2 billion of the world poor people. Since a majority share of land is held by small farmers, hence this SDG 2.3 of doubling small farmers' productivity and income is a very important target that we have. And if we are not able to achieve it, we will not be able to achieve other sub targets. Hence, smallholder farms are central to achieving SDG 2. So looking at India particularly, if we look at Indian farm sizes, so the Indian government focuses on what they term as small and marginal farmers. Marginal is less than 1 hectare and small is 1 to 2 hectares respectively. According to the most recent agricultural census, marginal holdings for 67% of the total land holdings. Like in India, 67% of land is in terms of less than 1 hectare and 18% is held as 1 to 2 hectares. So imagine 67 is less than 1 hectare and 18% is 1 to 2 hectares. The balance is more than 2 hectares, like 3 hectares and above. Just imagine, in India, 85% is less than 2 hectares. So if we need to improve malnutrition, if we need to end hunger, if we need to end malnutrition, we need to look at these 85% of farmers. And the thing is that despite recurring predictions that small farms will soon disappear, they have persisted in the case of India. And they have increased over time in numbers. If you see the orange line has increased. The green line has increased from 1970 to 2010. The orange and the green line, the small and the marginal farmers have been increasing. The large, the medium are falling. So that's what the issue is in India. Look at the lower panel. The green bar, marginal, number of land holdings is increasing for marginal. So over time, our small and marginal farmers are increasing. And small farms face a loss of challenge, like small farmers with less land, the small lands, marginal land holdings. They have very limited access to essential factors of production like financial services. They do not have access to credit. They're not able to get inputs at a cheap rate like seeds, fertilizer, pesticides. They cannot have economies of scale. They're very less, they're illiterate. So information on technologies is very poor. So addressing these challenges for agriculture development and for successfully achieving SDG 2 is crucial for India. So we can see that 85% is a huge number. So these numbers are very relevant, but the need is very urgent, because if we are not able to solve this problem now, farmers are finding it increasingly difficult to maintain a decent standard of living. Okay. Looking at income, we see that when we look at how much income do people earn from cultivation, just look at people with less than 1 hectare of land have a very small portion of their income from coming from cultivation. So income outside of cultivation is becoming important for farmers, like livestock, wages, non-farm business. So we need to promote this more so that they have extra income in hand. Coming to the next target, which is of 2.4, sub-target 2.4, which is by 2030, ensure sustainable food production system and implement resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity and production, that help maintain ecosystems, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other disaster, and that progressively improve land and soil quality. So we saw that we need to end hunger, we need to end malnutrition, we need to increase productivity. The next sub target is basically telling us that we need to sustain that increased productivity. We need to introduce practices, agricultural practices, which are temperature resilient, which are water resilient. Climate change is happening. We need that our yields should be resilient to these climate change. We need to strengthen the capacity for adaptation to the climate change. We need to come up with products, with crops that can be produced in a high temperature and low water requirement, that can be produced in extreme weather conditions. So we need to make our production system sustainable. That okay, if today we are able to meet the target of ending hunger by producing more, by increasing productivity, we should be able to sustain it. It's not that by 2030 we are in a country with no hunger, but later after 2030 we are again in the same situation because the crops we produced are not able to meet the requirements in post 2030 because of climate change issues and water issues. So we need to be sure that the crops that we are coming up with, the high yielding variety seeds we are coming up, are sustainable. Looking at the water crisis in our country, water is running out in some of the most productive areas of the country. Look at Punjab and Haryana. There is no water there. It's overly exploited. So we need to come up with crops that are water resilient. Look at the climate change risk. Look at the red bar. The temperature in South India and the temperature in Rabi season in South India and Kharif in North. Just look at the rising temperature, and this could be a big threat to the Rabi crop in East and South and Kharif crop in the North. Because if the temperature is going up, the crops will die because of high heat. We need to have heat resilient crops. So we need to intensify. How can we have a sustainable production system? We can have it by intensifying our production system. To get more food or to cope with climate induced stress on food production, either we need to increase the area under cultivation or increase productivity per area. So if we increase productivity per unit of land, we can get more food. If we increase the area under land, we can get more food, or we do both. What does sustainable intensification means? It means to obtain higher yields from 60% to 120% with no additional ecological impact, using only the land which is already under cultivation and leaving the rest of the land to support other ecosystem functions. We need land for biodiversity. We need land for flora and fauna. So this concept of intensifying agriculture or sustainable intensification basically means that this concept recognizes the value of ecosystem services from resources such as forest that can complement agriculture. Like forest is a very essential part. We need it to maintain biodiversity and other environmental and economic benefits such as improving water resources, improving soil quality. Forest is very much needed. So along with increasing food security for 9 billion people in 2050, we need to maintain the forest covers also. So this is all covered under sustainable intensification. Coming to the last sub-target of 2.5, which is by 2030, maintain the genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, and farmed and domesticated animals, and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at the national, regional, and international levels, and promote access to and fair equitable sharing of benefits arising from utilizing the genetic resources, as well as traditional knowledge and traditional knowledge. So basically it means that we need to increase production, but along with that, we need to maintain the genetic diversity. And how can that be done? We need to have more of seed banks, plant banks, diversified seed banks at not just the country level, but within a country level and as well as international level, so that we are able to have an equitable sharing of the benefits that come from using a high yielding crop. We should be able to distribute those benefits across the country and across the globe. Now, what is biodiversity and how can it support or help us achieve the sustainable development goal? How can this sub-target 2.5 help us in achieving the overall zero hunger goal? So biodiversity is essential for sustainable development and human well-being. It is the key element of food security and a means of improving nutrition. Many of the most vulnerable people, like very poor people, tribal population, they depend on food gathered from natural ecosystems such as forest, grasslands, oceans, and rivers. Biodiversity underpins this ecosystem functions such as pollination, maintains soil fertility, water quality, which is all central to agricultural productivity. Now, what will happen if there is a loss of biodiversity? What is happening is that biodiversity is losing, as well as people are leaving the traditional knowledge at a much faster rate than before. We need to conserve biodiversity and we need to use its component in a sustainable manner. And the 2030 agenda calls for supporting or for reducing the loss of biodiversity. It's very clear that the 2030 agenda of the 17 SDGs will not be achieved if biodiversity is not preserved. To do that, all the nations should work together to promote, to decrease loss of biodiversity. One more point I would like to highlight is that the goal zero hunger is not an independent goal. Achieving progress on SDG 2 would require us to identify synergies and trade-offs across many other poverty, health, social and environmental goals, sustainable development goals. So zero hunger is very much linked with the goal 1, which is no poverty. Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. Goal 3, good health and well-being. Goal 5, or gender inequality. Goal 10 of reducing inequality within and among countries. Goal 12 of responsibly producing and consuming the production. Goal 13 of climate action. And Goal 15 of life on land. We need to identify synergies and trade-off across all these goals. Now, this is the last slide where I would be talking about how can we saw that India is doing poor with respect to multiple sub-targets. But what can we do to be able to achieve that sub-target by 2030? So the last slide is, what are the prospects for achieving SDG 2 of zero hunger in the near future for India? So the SDG, basically what we saw is that the SDG commitments provide a great opportunity for addressing the chronic development problems faced by India as it moves towards becoming an emerging economy. We have seen that we need to eliminate chronic hunger and malnutrition, and we need to be particularly paying attention to central and eastern regions. We have also seen that we have not seen much progress in improvement in malnutrition. We've also seen that smallholder productivity and income requires much more strategic actions, and they are central to eliminate hunger. So what is required is that we need to achieve more progress on SDG 2. We need to channel our public, our private, our civil society resources and expertise. We also require multi-sectoral coordination across various ministries such as agriculture, food, women, child development, health, water, sanitation, rural development, etc. We need to channelize the energies put or efforts put by all of these ministries together so as to be able to achieve the goal of zero hunger and its sub-targets. So let us look at each of the sub-target and see how we can achieve it. So coming to the first sub-target of ending hunger. Can India achieve that? Certainly, it is possible to achieve the end of hunger as defined in terms of calorie adequacy. We can achieve the goal of giving the number of calories required by per person per day by 2030. But it is not at all certain that we will be able to make adequate progress on hidden hunger, which was micronutrient deficiency, because we do not yet have a system in place that can enhance the supply of as well as make affordable the diverse food that is needed for a nutritious for a better nutrition outcome, especially fresh food and vegetables and lifestyle products. So a system is not yet in place. Coming to the second target of ending malnutrition, we do expect to see significant reduction in malnutrition and stunting and wasting, seeing the commitment that we have. Poshan Abhiyan we are having, which is helping us reduce, particularly focusing on child stunting. However, complete elimination looks quite challenging. Okay, and at the same time, we are having a problem of rising obesity, which is expected to rise by 2030. So this has not yet been recognized by the Sustainable Development Goals, not yet recognized by the political level. So we need to put more emphasis on that. The third sub-target, doubling small farmer productivity and incomes. So we know that low productivity agricultural regions, especially those in Eastern India, they will continue to lag in productivity and income unless we are putting concerted efforts to diversify their production system. So we need to connect smallholder farmers to urban food value chains. We need to diversify away from staples like rice and wheat to greater levels of commercialization. We need to enhance input use efficiency in these high productivity zones, especially for water, fertilizer, fuel, and all of this will lead to income gains. And unless we do that, we cannot double small farm productivity and incomes. The fourth target of adapting to climate change. The major staple crops will be able to adapt to climate change, like rice and wheat. We will be able to come up with crops that can adapt to climate change because a lot of research is going into it. But the non-staples, especially pulses and coarse cereals, have not seen similar efforts and will not be able to adapt to climate change as effectively as major staples. So agricultural production in arid zones and the fringe areas, semi-arid tropics, may not be able to adapt to higher temperature, and we could see agriculture moving out of these areas, which could be very wrong for us. And lastly, sustainable production systems. We have the technology and management practices that can substantially increase the agriculture systems in India and improve resource use efficiency. However, the policy environment which we are in at the moment does not give enough incentives to the farmers that will help them change the behaviors. So we need to bring those policy environment that can help farmers to adopt to new behaviors and new practices in farming, that it becomes more sustainable. So it is becoming difficult to overcome in the past, and the prospects are poor that it will change in the next decade. So now I will open up for discussion. So today we discussed a very important sustainable development goal, which is the goal of zero hunger. But within that, we saw there were many sub-targets. And those sub-targets, we looked specifically for India, where we are, where we need to go, and how we could go. So that was the broad topic under which I presented the slides for India. The SDGs for the world, but I particularly focused on India. So I open the class for discussion now. If you have any questions, I see there's bad network quality, and I'm hoping that I was audible. But if you have any questions, if you want to see some slide again, please go ahead.
Just the question that I had was, has, and I'm assuming it has, but like, what sort of impact has coronavirus, like COVID-19, sort of created in setting back this sort of goal, like achieving this goal?
Vishwadhan, very important point is that this target was set in 2015. The SDGs were set in 2015. What has happened is, if we look at zero hunger targets, and if we look at these sub-targets of ending malnutrition, ending hunger, increasing productivity of income of small holdings, the COVID-19, the pandemic, we will be seeing, the data is yet not available, Yashwardhan, but the issue is that we will be seeing worse outcomes for all of this. We are sure that, remember, we had so much problems with respect to migration of poor people. Remember, we had lockdown, and because of that, we had so much of issues with agricultural production. The stocks were not being sold. They had to do distress selling. All of that will impact their incomes. So in the coming few years, we would be able to see the real impact of COVID-19. But my guess is that incomes would have gone further down, inequality has risen further, malnutrition must have risen further, hunger must have risen further. All of these issues must have worsened because of this pandemic. But the kind of steps we would be taking, the kind of steps we are taking is very crucial to help us out of this problem. So we are fortunate that we do have the resources. We have the kind of mindset. So many things were already in place. We were fortunate that these issues were already identified, that now because of the pandemic, at least we can put emphasis on these targets even more so that they do not worsen by a great extent. More questions, please. So I don't have my email ID on the slide. So my name is Sunaina, and you can reach me at sunaina@jgu.edu.in if you're interested in talking about any of these topics in more detail. I'm sure with the start of your career, with your master program, you would be very much involved in core subjects, but eventually you would be choosing electives, and I would be very happy to discuss more on all of these items, or more on these topics, which can help you decide further what kind of elective you should be taking in, because in your electives you would be required to do some research. And if these topics interest you, me being an empiricist also can help you guide with the kind of data sets you would be needing, etc., to pursue some kind of research on these topics. So I'll welcome you all to write to me. I may not be very prompt in responding to the emails because it's the start of the session and busy with my lectures, but I would definitely get back to you as soon as possible.